Chen Shi originally wanted to be a good person, but the first good thing he did plunged him into an irreversible situation. So he didn't want to be a good person anymore, and as soon as he had this idea, he was bound by the great boss system of the heavens and transported to the world of Ke Xue. The feeling of not being a good person is really great. Entry obtained. First time here, you have a legitimate identity and a past that can be investigated. Entry obtained. Karate practitioner, you have initially learned karate, but you are still far from the master, and you will receive an increase in strength while practicing karate. Entry obtained. Alcohol allergy, you have refused an invitation from the distillery and become its #1 enemy. You will gain an increase in combat against enemies with a wine code, Conan, Rapid Pursuit, Dead Sea, Marvel, Pacific Rim, under one person, Dragon Ball keywords of the novel. Starting from the world of science and technology to become the great boss of the heavens without pop-ups, starting from the world of science and technology to become the great boss of the heavens. Complete download of STXT, starting from the world of science and technology to become the great boss of the heavens. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The Heavens Need Villains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Heavens Need Villains. The fist landed heavily on the table, and a foul breath erupted from the mouth, roaring angrily before rushing over. Is there anything wrong with saving people? Of course saving someone is right, but who knows the truth? Wang Qian, sitting across the table, ignored Chen Shi's roar, with a frivolous eyebrow and a smile on his face, calmly sipping his tea. As a professional lawyer, of course, it is important to remain rational in handling any case. Moreover, this case is in line. As the name suggests, he works as a lawyer not for justice, but for money. He also knew the specifics of the case. A week ago, on the morning of the college entrance examination, the boy in front of him saved the girl who accidentally fell into the water. Although he delayed the college entrance examination, he directly received the admission notice from a prestigious school. It was originally a good thing worth promoting, but it exploded again on the internet 2 days after the incident. The reason was that the girl claimed that Chen Shi did not save someone, but pushed her into the water and then rescued her. Her parents have reported the incident. This news quickly dominated the hot search, and Chen Shi was also sued in court. As for the truth. Finding Wang Qian to become a lawyer is nothing more than taking advantage of the opportunity to blackmail. Thinking of the upcoming final payment, Wang Qian's lips curved even higher as he pulled out a prepared settlement agreement in a soft tone. You know, there was no surveillance footage at the location of the incident, and no one was recording it around. As for me, I have tried my best to negotiate a lower settlement amount for you. You don't want the situation to escalate, do you? Isn't it big enough? Chen Shi stared tightly at the agreement with red eyes, looking at the intimidating numbers on it, his fists clenched tighter and tighter. Children from poor families have long been in charge, and as an orphan, he has a mind far beyond that of his peers, relying on helping others with small tasks to make a living and study. Previously, I used to see various incidents of white-eyed wolves on the internet, but this time it has caused him to fall out. Thinking of rushing down to save lives in the cold lake water without hesitation, but now it has reached this point, regret is constantly growing in my heart. Let's leave that agreement here. Think more and give me a call when you've figured it out. Seeing the situation in a stalemate, Wang Qian shrugged slightly and stood up to leave directly. The events he participated in were not enough to add up his hands and feet. As long as the internet continued to ferment, those ignorant netizens would force Chen Shi to contact him. When the time comes, we can still argue for more money. As for whether Chen Shi can afford to pay, he has a friend who specializes in various types of loans. From day to night, the sky was completely devoid of light, and the room was pitch black. Chen Shi still sat at the table, but his eyes were no longer angry, only endless exhaustion and unwillingness. Cough cough cough, cigarettes irritated his lungs, making Chen Shi, who had never smoked before, feel uncomfortable. However, This is currently the only way he can relieve stress. Leaving aside whether he can afford the compensation, the two contrasting hot searches have already made him a household name. On the second day after the start of this blackmail incident, he also posted a clarification online, and public opinion was almost one-sided. There were many people speaking for him, but they were all pushed down by those highly praised and malicious words, which also cut off his desire to continue online self-verification. The smoke burned out, the only light source in the room disappeared, and Chen Shi completely dissolved into the darkness. It's tiring, being a good person is tiring, it's better to be a bad guy. Unity of will, adversarial system of heavens descends a binding task. Punish the betrayer. After completing this task, the system will bind to the host, and the host's performance will determine the future development direction. System. Chen Shi's life cannot be all about studying and working. In his spare time, he also reads novels and animations to enjoy himself. He is not unfamiliar with the concept of systems. Repeatedly confirming that the text in front of him was not an illusion, Chen Shi's breathing was rapid, and his excitement was evident in his words. 3 days later, Xiaolan Lake. For children, the play location is definitely not too far from home, as long as they wait, there is a chance. Sure enough, near the lakeside shop, Chen Shi saw the little girl he had saved again. Still wearing the same clothes as when she fell into the water, with a runny nose and a dirty face, her little head staring at the spicy noodles in the store, full of longing. Not quite right. Chen Shi frowned and said strangely in his heart. You should know that it's March now, and the winter cold wave is not completely over yet. The outdoor temperature is only around 10 degrees. I didn't pay much attention when I went into the water to save people, but now I realize that the little girl's clothes are clearly summer clothes. And there are also traces of sweat and water mixed and dried on it. Child, Chen Shi crouched in front of the little girl, pointing to the spicy strips and said, do you want to eat spicy strips? Due to him wearing a scarf and hat, and his eyes covered with thick frames, the little girl did not recognize him. No, I don't want to eat, the little girl nodded first, then shook her head and refused as if thinking of something. Chen Shi reached out and rubbed his messy head, got up and walked to the store, selecting a bunch of snacks to put on the cashier. 74. After being busy for a while, the salesperson informed the price and said coldly, if you want to sell it to Xiaoling, it's best to be careful. What does it mean? Chen Shi asked in confusion. Just the girl outside, her family is not easy to get along with. It seems that you are not a resident here, so let me remind you. Forcefully handing snacks to Xiaoling, Chen Shi followed closely behind him, trying to see what the salesperson was saying in confusion. Walk along the main road by the lake for more than 300 meters, then turn a few times on the path. Xiaoling stands in front of a wall, lies down, and drills into a small hole. Chen Shi then came here and crouched in front of the small hole, looking at the floating fur on the edge and muttering, dog hole. This should be a residential area, why does Xiaoling have to find such a remote corner to drill a dog hole when she comes home? The wall was not too high, but Chen Shi barely climbed over it after running up and continued to follow the little girls back from a distance. In the corner of the underground parking lot, Little Leap came to a hut built of cardboard and foam boxes, hid in it, took out the snacks hidden under the clothes, and couldn't wait to tear open the package and put it into his mouth. Little bitch, you are really here. Before I could chew more, the foam hut was kicked apart. It seems that a middle-aged woman in her 40s grabbed the girl's ear and pulled at her without leaving any effort, spewing out various dirty words in her mouth. After enjoying the fight and cursing happily, the woman picked up those snacks and shouted, "You're not going back yet. If someone else sees this, they think I've treated you unfairly." Chen Shi hid in the dark with a cold expression. This is the woman who recently blocked his doorstep with Wang Qian, reversing black and white, and demanding compensation. Xiaoling covered her bleeding ears and followed the woman, occasionally stepping into the elevator. Seeing that the floor number remained at 19, Chen Shi took another elevator to the 18th floor and then climbed the stairs to the 19th floor. This community has a high level of quality, with only 2 households on each floor, but before entering the hallway, I heard women shouting and cursing again. Xiao Jingqi. Look at your damn niece, she ran to the parking lot. If I hadn't found her, I can't say how these residents would talk about us. Chen Shi poked his head out and found that the door was not closed. The middle-aged woman was facing another man of similar age and scolding him head-on. Your younger brother died and left such a burden behind. If it weren't for the sake of this house, I would have thrown her away long ago. Also, I heard from Lawyer Wang that the little ghost who saved people has been missing these past few days. You should quickly contact those friends on the street to find them. Make sure he takes out the money. My son wants to buy a car in the United States. Half an hour before and after, the man just lowered his head and listened, occasionally nodding to respond with a few words. Chen Shi, who was eavesdropping, also understood what the situation was. Xiaoling's parents passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, and Xiao Jingqi was given custody of the house. But this family did not treat this little girl as their own daughter, nor did they even become family members. They would either fight or curse every day, and just give some leftover food to starve to death. That day, it was probably Xiaoling who couldn't bear this violence and wandered outside, hungry and cold, before falling into the water. Originally, these 2 couples didn't think so much after the rescue incident, but because their son in the United States called to ask for money, they turned their attention to Chen Shi. The hammer was pulled out from his waist, and Chen Shi tightly grasped it. He quietly sneaked into the room and walked behind Xiao Jingqi, who was cooking in the kitchen. Xiao Jingqi thought it was his wife and didn't turn his head. He directly asked, "Did you take your phone when using the restroom?" Pang! The hammer hit the back of his head, and Xiao Jingqi let out a scream and fell to the ground. After seeing the person coming, he was frightened and said, It's you. Without any further ado, Chen Shi smashed it again, and Xiao Jingqi's eyes rolled and he couldn't move. The toilet door opened at this moment, and the middle-aged woman shouted, "What's wrong with you?" Chen Shi hid behind the wall and launched a fierce attack when he approached. Binding task completed, about to be teleported to the first-level world. Detective Conan, are you the brother who saved me? With violent movements, Xiaoling, who was hiding in the corner, also recognized Chen Shi, who had saved her earlier. My name is Chen Shi, I'm a bad guy, Chen Shi said with a smile, and then disappeared in a blink of an eye. Opening my eyes, the unfamiliar ceiling made the room space slightly cramped. Successfully teleported, can choose to return when the villain value in the current world exceeds 80%, current villain value. 0, entry obtained. First time here, you have a legal identity and a history that can be studied. Detective Conan, one of the best-selling anime genres on the side of Football Chicken, has been enduring for a long time. Chen Shi doesn't know much about this anime, and the plot he has watched is not coherent. He only remembers a rough idea. There is a student ID by the bedside, which reads, Class B, Grade 2, Daidan Middle School. I think this is the function that comes with the system entry newcomer. Ding 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 on the table next to the bed, an old-fashioned flip phone made a sound, displaying an unfamiliar number. After a brief hesitation, Chen Shi answered the phone and said coldly, Hello. Hello, may I ask if this is Chen Shi? I am Xiaolan from your class, and Suzuki Unz is with me. We are right at your doorstep now. Are you at home? Xiaolan said softly on the other end of the phone. Okay. Xiaolan's words revealed a piece of information that it is highly likely that she had not been to school before, otherwise her classmates would not have used such language. Opening the door, 2 slightly green girls stood in front of Chen Shi, one with tall and beautiful hair, and the other with teasing eyes and a rosy complexion. The teacher asked us to pick you up from school. Muri Lan smiled and bowed slightly. Is it Class B in the second year of Daidan High School? Chen Shi nodded, his face unchanged. Xiaolan looked surprised and said, "Your Japanese is very good, very standard." Japanese. Chen Shi immediately came to the conclusion that the system should have built that IN translation function, because what he just said was authentic Mandarin. Thank you for the compliment. Let's go. Turning around and taking his student ID, Chen Shi closed the door and walked behind the two of them. The birthplace is not far from the school, about 1 kilometer away, and the three of them walked calmly, as if taking a walk. "Oh, my name is Suzuki Yuenzi, just call me Yuenzi. Which city in China are you from? Maybe I have been there before." Yuanzi walked beside Chen Shi, her cheeks rosy and pink, her eyes occasionally scanning Chen Shi's face. "Magic City." Chen Shi's answer was still concise, but it did not hinder Yuanzi's interest. The two of them had a continuous conversation. Xiaolan looked at the garden that had committed the flower obsession, speechless for a moment, but also continued talking from time to time. Upon arriving at the school, the system text in front of Chen Shi reappeared. Entry obtained. Scholar, rich knowledge is a necessary foundation for a big boss, you will never forget it from this moment on. Like dry soil encountering nectar, Chen Shi's brain suddenly became incredibly joyful, to the point where a smile involuntarily appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chen Shi seems to really like school. I haven't seen him smile all the way, but as soon as I entered school, I laughed. Yuenzi whispered to Muri Lan as she leaned in. She was originally accompanying Xiaolan for a walk and picking up the newly transferred students to school. I didn't expect the transfer student to be a handsome guy, and Suzuki Yoko, that's all. On the road, I was tinkering around for a long time. I thought Chen Shi's character was a cold academic bully, but now it looks like a sunny and cheerful big boy. Why did Chen Shi ignore her earlier? Do you think so? Yuenzi was taken aback and leaned closer to Xiaolan's ear, saying, "Do you think he will?" Upon hearing Yuenzi's words of tiger and wolf, Xiaolan was first surprised, then her eyes drifted towards Chen Shi, and finally whispered back, "Yuenzi, don't guess, it would be very embarrassing to be heard." "It's okay, I don't like men." "I just remembered some sad things earlier," Chen Shi suddenly interrupted with a loud voice. The brain is relaxed, and thoughts are also conveyed in this instant. Since we have obtained the system and traveled through it, why are we still immersed in the previous pessimistic mentality? Ah! Yuanzi didn't react much, and in an instant, Lilan's blood rushed up and her face turned red. She quickly bowed, "I'm sorry, Chen Shi." However, after this little farce, the relationship between the three people has eased a lot. After the class began, Chen Shi also began to make an initial appearance, making use of the exaggerated knowledge reserves of the former small-town SWAT to shine. The villain value also increased to 0.1%. This 0.1% speculation by Chen Shi may be due to a hint of jealousy developed by a high school detective who had not yet grown up when his childhood sweetheart looked at him in surprise. By the way, tomorrow is the weekend. Cindy and I are planning to go to the amusement park to play. Do Chen want to come with us? Xiaolan, who is already familiar with each other, sent an invitation to Chen Shi. Chen Shi waved his hand and said, "I still won't disturb your couple's date." Amusement park, roller coaster, the beginning of the plot. Detective Kudo Shinichi, a high school student, went missing today, and the death god Adagawa Konan, a primary school student, appeared. He had no intention of becoming a light bulb, and besides, there were two dangerous figures at the scene. Gin and vodka. Before he became strong, he didn't want to have any contact with the distillery. Chen Shi's words made Muri Lan blush, and Kudo Shinichi, who was following him to monitor, looked around with some embarrassment. He had already concluded through observing various details that Chen Shi was just a high school transfer student, and following Xiaolan was just a passing and secondary confirmation. Is it a problem as a detective to guard against various possible retaliations? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Roller Coaster Incident. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 2 Roller Coaster Incident. The next day, Chen Shi arrived at the karate venue he had inquired about with Murilan yesterday. If there is any easily accessible channel for strengthening Konan world, it can only be found in karate. In this world, the intensity of karate is so high that it can be exaggerated. Hands can smash power poles, feet can kick over cars, it's like a land superhero. However, he does not intend to be a beginner, the main purpose of this trip is to visit. It is said that there will be a competition in the venue today, and he will never forget it. Since his goal is the ultimate boss of this world, Chen Shi never thought of only learning karate in the field of physical skills. If this world is only as exaggerated as karate, then the footed chicken will force everyone to learn and form an army to not dominate the world. If you want to be a powerful boss, of course, you need to gather the strengths of 100 schools. Inside the venue, Chen Shi successfully entered under the name of Xiaolan. Because it's still early, the contestants just rushed to do warm-up one after another. It is said that this is a competition for the entire Tokyo region, and 5 contestants were ultimately selected to enter the national finals. This venue happens to be the venue for the Mihuacho finals. Xiaolan did not participate in this competition due to schedule conflicts, but also won the Tokyo Regional Championship a few days ago. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the game begins. The 2 contestants stood on the arena, colliding with each other with a command. Upon careful listening, they could hear the dull sound in the air, indicating that both sides had great strength. Chen Shi's eyes widened as he recorded these images in his mind, while distracting himself from studying the contestants' ways of exerting force. But as he delved deeper, he found it even more eerie. These moves are obviously very ordinary, but they use exaggerated power, indicating that the difference in power output should not be too significant compared to before crossing. Since it's not a move or a way of exerting power, what other martial arts secrets can it be? Chen Shi shifted his attention and finally found clues in the breathing patterns of the contestants. When attacking, defending, and using moves, the players maintain slightly different but roughly the same breathing methods. To verify his conjecture, on the way home, he found a corner utility pole and learned the breathing techniques of memory. He punched it with a punch. Hiss. Holding his right hand, Chen Shi painfully observed the very faint punch marks on the electric pole, feeling extremely excited in his heart. He guessed it right. Entry obtained. Karate practitioner, you have initially learned karate, but you are still far from the master, and you will receive an increase in strength while practicing karate. The system prompt appeared, and the karate scenes in my mind began to continuously blend into my body. One move at a time was already able to achieve without too many flaws, and now I just need to practice continuously. The excitement of gaining strength constantly generated adrenaline in the body, and the pain in his right hand was also suppressed. Chen Shi tied his feet and punched one fist after another, falling into a certain state of enlightenment. Hurry up and go home. Mom is making eel rice today. In the afterglow of the sunset, the chubby little man shouted and urged the 2 panting little classmates behind him. Ha! Gasped the thin boy, as long as you mention eel rice, you will never use up your spirit. Yuan Tai was somewhat dissatisfied and retorted, Guanyan and Bumei just didn't understand the deliciousness of eel rice. The little girl Bumei did not refute, but her eyes pointed to the corner ahead with a hint of fear. Look, what's that? At this moment, when the streetlights were not on and the sun was setting, they were standing in the backlight position. Looking in the direction of their fingers, they saw a black figure squatting in front of the electric pole, punching non-stop. Every time, a few drops of blood were squeezed and splashed out, and the black figure's face was filled with a charming and obsessed smile. The 3 children couldn't help but roll their throats and their legs tremble. The first person to react was Guanyan, who shouted, "There's a monster." He took the lead in escaping, and the remaining Yuan Tai and Bumei followed closely behind. Negative value. 0.4%, the screams also startled Chen Shi from his enlightenment state and he hurriedly left. Returning home, washing away the sweat that had soaked his whole body, Chen Shi lay in bed and began to moan. After retiring from karate practice, his entire body was protesting against this overclocking training, which was so addictive that the system became a demon at this moment. As a big boss, how can the protagonist not be present at the crucial moment of first time task? 1. Go to the amusement park. 2. Take a roller coaster ride. 3. Watch the entire process of Kudo Shinichi's reverse growth. Completing task 1 earns a reward of +1 physical fitness, completing task 2 earns a reward of shadow mask, and completing task 3 earns a mysterious item. After a fit of incompetence and rage, Chen Shi put on his clothes and headed to the amusement park. The system does not mention the punishment for task failure or that it is an optional task. He can choose not to go and spend the night in bed, while also losing a chance to become stronger. But only by becoming stronger can one control life, and only by becoming stronger can one obtain freedom. Buy tickets, enter the venue, and complete task 1. Chen Shi committed a crime at the entrance of the roller coaster, as it only had 8 seats and was currently filled with 6, including Kudo Shinichi and Muri Ran, as well as 4 who appeared to be the culprits and victims of this case. As for the remaining 2 seats, gin and vodka just passed by him, and the vodka shouted, "Get out of the way, we'll come first." Chen Shi dare not argue with these 2 about who comes first and who comes last, at least not for now. Aizen had to hide from the old man Yamamoto in the pure spirit court, let alone he was just a 5th scumbag now. The idea of doing business in this amusement park is really rubbish. The roller coasters passing through the previous amusement parks are a long string, and I wish I could load all the tourists in. Chen Shi rose in his heart, and simply stood still. The task of the system is to ride rather than play, and wait for Kudo Shinichi to start reasoning before quietly touching it. It didn't take long for the roller coaster to stop, and after more than 10 minutes, it returned to the platform with a fresh headless body. It was still some time before the police arrived, but Shinichi Kudo started to maintain order at the scene, blocking gin and vodka from leaving. Qin Zhou's face was full of impatience. When the police came over, they found out that he was a fugitive wanted criminal. However, it was not easy to get angry in front of everyone, so I had to stare coldly at Shinichi Kudo, pondering whether to deal with this troublemaker after escaping. Xiaolan classmate. Chen Shi greeted Xiaolan and then calmly crossed the warning line to approach. Muri Lan was a bit dazed. After all, she had not yet experienced the ubiquitous aura of death that came with Conan. Getting close to the body made her face turn pale. After being called out by Chen Shi, she regained her senses and looked at someone who was nominally her boyfriend but was now observing the body. She gritted her silver teeth and gave Kudo Shin a fierce glance before turning her head and asking, "Did Chen also come to the amusement park?" "Well, if you're really bored at home, come and take a stroll. Have you encountered a case yet?" "Oh yes, Shinichi Kudo is a detective." Chen Shi slowly approached with an excuse, then pretended to trip and rushed into the roller coaster in 3 or 2 steps. When he got up, he used his strength to sit in his seat. The system prompted him to complete the task before climbing out, apologizing profusely in sweat. Sweating is due to pain, falling is a fake fall, and pain is real pain. In addition, after practicing the sky hand technique for a while, my stamina has long been exhausted. Just an ordinary fall, Kudo Shinichi glanced at it and then continued to focus on gathering various clues, but Chen Shi was classified by him as a suspect and verbally controlled. When the police arrived, Qin Zhou spoke up and said, "It was just an accident. Let's go." But after sorting out the case process, how can Kudo Shinichi, who wants to pretend to be coerced, succeed? Immediately he said, "Officer, this is a murder case, and the suspect is among the people riding the roller coaster. Oh, by the way, there's also Chen Shi, who came into contact with the roller coaster from behind." Listening to the onlookers around him shouting, "That's the famous high school detective Shinichi Kudo." So handsome, his sense of achievement became even more satisfying. But he didn't know that Chen Shi had already clenched his fists and planned to assassinate him. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Shadow Masks and Trailing Events. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Shadow Masks and Trailing Events. Officer, this lady has a knife in her purse, said a police officer, pointing to the sharp knife stained with blood in her beloved bag. Izzy quickly explained, no, I really don't know what's going on with this knife. Since the killer has been caught, let's leave first. Chen Shi once again searched for an excuse to leave the scene. It's not that lady, Shinichi Kudo said loudly, then strolled over to Little Tong and reached out his finger. There's only one truth, you're the culprit. That kind of knife can cut through a person's neck, and it's even more impossible with the strength of a woman. This knife was just put inside by you in advance to frame trouble for Miss Izzy. But she's sitting at the front of the roller coaster, and Mr. Kishida's sitting in the third row, isn't that very likely, said Megumi 13, who had little presence, seizing the opportunity to appear, if using piano wire or metal wheels, and then installing a hook prop on the steel rope, then. Kudo Shinichi called the police onto a roller coaster and personally demonstrated the process of committing the crime. Chen Shi silently looked at the personal show in front of him, and silently roast. It's really outrageous to be able to do this kind of difficult crime by hanging on four limbs on a roller coaster at a speed of hundreds of kilometers per hour in the dark. And shouldn't the police protect the crime scene as soon as they arrive, then transport the body back for autopsy and control all suspects? Even if we have planned for a very long time and collected a large amount of blood from the deceased to smear on the knife to forge false evidence, the autopsy can still identify the cause of death. After all, there is such a big difference between knife and thread cutting. According to the elimination method, the suspicion will be locked onto the first and last rows of two people for itinerary investigation. This level of murder must be rehearsed several times in advance. Right, the summary is that the police only use soy sauce. After Shinichi Kudo finished demonstrating the process of the crime and presented evidence gathered from several little brats, Little Tong collapsed and knelt on the ground, crying fiercely, starting to tell a story. After more than 2 hours of tinkering, Chen Shi carefully followed Kudo Shinichi not far away, waiting for the opportunity to complete Task 3. To witness the entire process of its reverse growth, it is necessary to find the location of the incident and evade the Qin Wine counter-reconnaissance, which is quite difficult. If you can do it, just do it. If you can't, just do it. Not long after, Shinichi Kudo noticed the vodka hurriedly running to the trading location and quickly pulled over to follow, leaving Muri ran with a worried face. Chen Shi turned around and wanted to follow through a nearby alley, but in the next second, he froze completely. I saw Chen Shi standing in the shadow of the alley, his eyes scanning him coldly. Do you also need to use the restroom? Turn left in front of the toilet. Thank you. After feeling completely out of the sight of Chen Shi, he finally breathed a sigh of relief, almost dying before the late emperor started his own business. Fortunately, the excuse of defecating or defecating anywhere is still considered normal. It seems that today's task 3 cannot be completed. Go home and fall asleep. In his dream, Chen Shi returned to the moment he collided with Chen Shi, but Chen Shi didn't say anything and directly pulled out his pistol and pulled the trigger. Consciousness perspective switching, he saw gunpowder burning, bullets shooting out from the muzzle, bullets sinking into his forehead and hitting the hole. Inside the hole, there was a dim vortex constantly spinning, and consciousness was sucked in and sunk. Ah! Awakened from bed, it was just dawn outside. Wash your face with clean water in the bathroom, and the weak fear gradually subsides. Looking up through the mirror at the gray dot on your forehead. Shadow mask. The beginning of infinite darkness. After consciousness activation, the host enters a shadow state, in which the recovery ability of the host is multiplied by 2, immunity to 30% physical damage, and lethal protection once. Embrace shadows. Facing a creature can pull its soul into a shadow vortex. Each individual requires different amounts of time, which can be used every 48 hours, no need to think, this is the shadow mask in the mission reward. Enter shadow mode. A light gray viscous substance overflowed from the gray spots on the forehead and spread to the whole body within seconds. A thin film was coated on the surface of Chen Shi's skin, and upon closer inspection, only a slight lightening of the skin color could be observed. Using a knife for experiments, it was found that it takes some effort to break through the film. After the knife leaves, the film will cover the wound again to stop bleeding, slowly pulling and closing, and finally the scab will fall off, leaving only a shallow mark. Combined with lethal protection, it is a reliable life-saving artifact. Chen Shi immediately decided to keep the shadow state. After opening the refrigerator and sweeping away the last bit of food inside, he discovered a new problem. Before the identity given by the system is really just one identity, everything is settled in one go. After spending some money at the amusement park yesterday, he only had 1,000 yen left all over his body, which was enough to buy a few barrels of instant noodles. How can we make money? Chen Shi leaned back in his chair and thought, why don't we become detectives? With the foresight and unforgettable memory of some of the plot, it seems that being a detective is really possible. Moreover, the detective's salary is quite high, which can meet his daily needs and provide him with the opportunity to continue practicing martial arts. Additionally, he can also interact with the plot to see if system tasks can be triggered. As for getting in touch with Yuko Suzuki and becoming the strongest son.in.law to eat soft rice, sorry, Chen Shi is not interested. His thinking, far beyond that of his peers, has already made him understand in advance that women are a very troublesome species, which will only affect his speed of drawing swords. But how did you receive the commission? If there is no popularity, no one will come knocking. Fame. Fame, by the way. Chen Shi clapped the table and stood up. In terms of popularity, after Shinichi Kudo became smaller and went to the Mori detective office, a celebrity named Yoko Okano commissioned him. The commission involved secretly searching for the person who was tracking her, but upon returning home, the body of her ex-boyfriend was discovered. The celebrity's itinerary is not easy to inquire about, but it can be confirmed that Yoko Okano will go to the Mori detective office in a few days. 3 days later, at night, Chen Shi, who was about to vomit while eating instant noodles, stood outside the Mori detective office and reached out to stop a black car trying to park at the entrance. Miss Chonye Yoko. Chen Shi knocked on the rear car window and asked. The driver was Rongi Yamashita, the agent of Yoko Ono. He poked his head out and looked at Chen Shi with a slight hostility, questioning, how do you know Miss Yoko's distance? He suspected that the young man in front of him was the stalker they had been looking for. Has someone been following you recently? Chen Shi's words made him even more convinced of his conjecture. He took out a swing stick from under his seat and cursed, you audacious stalker, dare to show up. I want to control Chen Shi as soon as I get off the car. Wait. Chen Shi quickly explained, I'm a detective here to help Miss Ono Yoko solve the stalker problem, and I already know who the stalker is. Shonen Rongi stopped his attack, but remained vigilant. Then tell me your reasoning. Yuko Chizawa, she stole your spare key and then infiltrated to search for evidence of your scandal. After that, Chen Shi pointed to the Mori detective office and said, Detective Mori Kogoro, you can come find him to verify my words. The rear window glass lowered, and Yoko Okano nodded and said, okay, if you're telling the truth, I'll pay you a fee and help you promote it. If you're just fabricating something to catch my attention, I'll report it to the police and sue you. There are many unknown young people in this era of detective mainstream, and she doesn't have to think about everything she wants. Chen Shi smiled and pointed to the Maori detective agency, saying, please. This is all in his plan, and as long as he follows Mori Kogoro to Yoko Okano's home, this matter will be stable. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Misery of Kogoro. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Misery of Kogoro, you stinky little brat. Upon learning that his business had been cut off, Mori Kogoro became furious and shouted, wanting to come up for a live PK. Fortunately, Mori Ran stood in the way. With two legs galloping together, the adult's strength was easily dissipated. Mori Lan advised, "Dad, don't worry. Anyway, Miss Yoko's salary is the same, isn't it? You can try giving young people some opportunities." Yoko Okano also intervened appropriately. Humph. Mori Kogoro snorted coldly, breaking free from his daughter's embrace and staring at Chen Shi angrily. "Since it looks like the young lady has spoken, then forget it. But wait, I will definitely expose your lies." Xiaolan walked up to Chen Shi's ear and apologized softly, "Don't worry about Chen, my dad has this kind of personality." Chen Shi nodded awkwardly and also replied, "It's not my fault, uncle. After all, I'm also trying to grab business, but I really don't have much else to do before making this decision." Looking at the embarrassed look on the young man in front of her, Xiaolan recalled the teacher who called her over a few days ago and specifically explained, Chen Shi is an orphan. He relied on his hard work to get the opportunity to study in Japan. "Xiaolan, you have a good personality, so I beg you to take care of him more in the future." The story of a lonely young man without parents who struggled alone in a foreign land from a young age, struggling to make a living in society due to financial difficulties, quickly took shape in her mind. "Don't worry, Chen, everything will be okay." Xiaolan suddenly grabbed Chen Shi's hand and said sincerely. Chen Shi's face was full of confusion, thinking to himself what the female protagonist was doing. Anti-faction value plus 0.1%, a system prompt came in front of him, and Chen Shi was taken aback. Then he looked at a big-headed little ghost beside him, his eyes turned around, but he didn't choose to pull his hand out. Instead, he tightly grasped the delicate hand. Anti-faction value plus 0.5%, white whoring villain value, and a beautiful girl's hand touch, cool. But what Xiaolan, who was held by Chen Shi in the opposite direction, thought was, "It seems that I have helped Chen Shi find a place to rest. We must help Chen Shi well." Negative value plus 0.2%, this time, the source is another uncle who has not yet dissipated his initial anger and is rising again. Mori Kogoro reached out and pulled Mori Lan back to his side, his eyes full of caution. "Xiaolan, don't get too close to such a mischievous little devil. After grabbing labor and capital jobs, still want to grab labor and capital daughters." In the guarded eyes of one big, one small, and four small, Chen Shi followed a group of people to Yoko Okano's residence. Pushing open the door, a piercing scream pierced through the brain, and a corpse lay in the middle of the living room, with a sharp knife piercing into the back of the heart and blood flowing all over the ground. "The police will arrive soon. The familiar yellow sphere is at dusk. So it seems that the suspect is Miss Yoko Ono. After all, this is your home, and only you have the key." Mori Kogoro quickly suppressed the nervous Ono Yoko and retorted, "How could it be Miss Yoko? What is the reason? Miss Yoko, such a lovely person, how could she have committed a crime?" Everyone present fell silent. "Well," Chen Shi reminded, "the key to this room was stolen by Yuko Chi 3 days ago. I think we can call her over for questioning." Mori Kogoro clapped his hands and said, "Yes. Yuko Ikozawa stole the key, and she also followed Miss Yoko to get a scandal. She must have killed someone in the house and framed Miss Yoko for it." Conan, who had been searching for clues in various corners, was speechless. If he remembered correctly, this uncle had been clamoring 10 minutes ago to expose Chen Shi's lies. However, this did not affect his reasoning. He walked behind the sofa and adjusted the bow on his chest, shouting, "There seems to be something under the sofa." After hearing this, Mumu 13 found the earrings under the sofa and asked someone to call Yuko Ikazawa over. Chen Shi. "Oh, not really. Don't you think it's strange that there's no one next to the sofa, but there's a sound coming from there?" After a while, Yuko Chizawa arrived and denied the ownership of the earrings and her tracking behavior. She firmly claimed her innocence and went to the restroom, expressing her intention to sue Chen Shi for planting slander. Miss Yuzi must also be living in this apartment, otherwise how would she know where the restroom is and be proficient in using a lighter? Chen Shi used the yin-yang technique, but Yuko Chia's was silenced and her health was reduced to 0. It's not like that, I didn't kill him. Faced with the accusations from Kogoro Mori, Yuko Ikozawa panicked. That man suddenly attacked, I was just resisting. I have indeed been here a few times, using that stolen key, and have already found evidence of the scandal. After entering the room during the day today, the man also followed in, and I resisted desperately before escaping. Mori Kogoro said that you are purely sophistry, there is only one truth, and the culprit is you. At this moment, a police officer brought over the information of the deceased and said, the identity of the deceased has been found. His name is Mingi Fujiwara, 22 years old. After graduating from Hong Kong South High School, he worked at Koh Kong Commercial Company. Upon hearing about Hong Kong South High School, Yoko Okano couldn't hold back any longer. She cried and confessed, telling her story with Akira Fujiwara. Upon hearing the story, Mori Kogoro's gaze became firm as he turned to his agent, Roichi Yamashita, and said, you are the murderer. You killed the deceased in order to prevent the scandal of Miss Yoko from being exposed. That's right, there's only one truth. Mr. Maoli used to be a criminal policeman, didn't he? It was the same when I worked with you at that time. Chen Shi gathered around Mumu Shirsan and roast. Mumu said in 13 words, at that time, Brother Maori often guided us to investigate in strange directions. Don't be too arrogant, you little devil. Before he could finish speaking, an ashtray fell from the sky and hit Mori Kogoro's head. After struggling for a few steps, he sat down on a nearby sofa. Then, Conan hid behind the sofa and began to reason about the case using a voice changer. Chen Shi. Here we go again. Ke Xue scene. Unexpectedly, no one saw the Lungda ashtray. After some reasoning, Conan exhaled a long and turbid breath, expressing his sorrow for the deceased Fujiwara Akiyoshi, as well as his speechless desire to be with someone as unreliable as Mori Kogoro in the future. But as soon as he turned his head, cold sweat quickly condensed in his pores, and Chen Shi stood next to the sofa, looking at him with a strange expression on his face. Gudu, Conan swallowed his saliva and forced an awkward smile. Is brother Chen Shi okay? Confused uncle and genius little ghost, a strange combination, Chen Shi muttered as he left. If Conan was granted amnesty, he would be completely softened. I wanted to hug Xiaolan's thigh to comfort myself, but as soon as I approached, I was hit by a pimple and said, Conan, don't give anyone any trouble. Your father is clearly the one. Why do I often have tears in my eyes? Because this little Goro is deeply pitted. At the end of the incident, due to Mori Kogoro's investigation into the suicide case and not allowing the scandal of Yoko Okano to spread, Yamagami Rongi generously offered double the reward, and Kogoro exclaimed happily, go home and have a drink. As for Chen Shi's side, he exchanged contact information with Yoko Okano for 500,000 yen. Yoko Okano will recommend him when there are suitable cases. That's Miss Yoko's contact information, said Xiao Wulang, who had just become happy. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Shinkansen Incident, over $1 billion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Shinkansen Incident, over $1 billion. Chen Shi, negative value. 1.2%, entries. 1. New arrival, you have a legal identity and a traceable past. 2. Scholar, rich knowledge is a necessary foundation for a big boss, and you will never forget it from this moment on. 3. Karate practitioner, you have learned karate initially, but are still far away from the master, and you will get an increase in karate practice. 4. Time disorder syndrome, at the moment when Kudo Shinichi grows in the opposite direction, the world rules undergo unknown changes, but you cannot adapt, but your lifespan will no longer decline and your body will stop growing. Possessing prop. Shadow Mask, beginning of infinite darkness. The term, time disorder syndrome, was acquired on the morning of Yoko Okino's tracking event on the fourth day when he came to the world. The reason is that Chen Shi went to school and found out that the day was Saturday, while the previous Saturday was the day before yesterday. The date is also incorrect. He remembers that the day he came was May 3rd, and in just 3 days, he jumped to June 15th. However, this did not have a significant impact on him, so carrying this calendar with him solved the problem. Of course, the dates recorded on the calendar also change at midnight every day, but only Chen Shi can observe this world. It has been 11 days since he traveled, and aside from the first 4 days, Chen Shi has been practicing karate for a week. Due to entering an epiphany state from the beginning of training, his progress speed is very fast. He is now able to whip his legs to crack the electric pole and punch straight into a gap, but it feels like he has entered a certain bottleneck and needs to accumulate some knowledge to break through. It has to be said that practicing martial arts requires a significant amount of food, and once one enters an enlightenment state, they must replenish at least twice their original food intake to meet the body's needs. Fortunately, he managed to get some money from the case of intercepting Humaoli Kogoro, otherwise he would probably have considered robbing maple leaf gold coins. That thing is too well known, and it is difficult to clean it up. Even if it enters the gray area, there are not many people accepting it, and it is also easy to attract others to come and eat black. Especially for the distillery, Chen Shi didn't believe they had no idea about maple leaf coins. This does not align with his current core tactical strategy of accumulating grain and slowly becoming king. As a big boss, your name needs to be passed down in the world. Task 1. Take the Shinkansen to Kyoto. Task 2. Activate when the villain value reaches 2%. Task 3. Activate when the villain value reaches 5%. Completing Task 1 earns a reward of +1 physical fitness. Completing Task 2 earns a reward entry of +1 promotion points, and completing Task 3 earns a prop of the Merciful Blade, the Shinkansen to Kyoto. If Chen Shi remembers correctly, this seems to be the incident where 2 people imitated gin and vodka to go black and eat black, but were mistaken by Conan for a staff member of a distillery. As a result, the situation was disrupted and they were arrested instead. By the way, how much stolen money did the buyer give in this matter? 1 billion. No, what kind of stolen money? This is a reward for being a high school detective who bravely acts for righteousness. With 2 eyes shining, Chen Shi took out a set of 1.2.1 replica distillery coats from his wardrobe and put them on, heading towards the Shinkansen platform. He speculates that there should be 2 channels to obtain villain values. The first is fame, which means causing various sabotage and being wanted to become a nationwide villain. The second is to take action against the protagonist and related personnel, and the previous villain value benefits from this. The first method he doesn't intend to implement before he becomes stronger, but the second method is possible. As long as you grasp the strength, the main characters will be like fresh and tender chives one by one. The winery coat was also prepared for this moment. Of course, he can't really have too many ideas about the protagonist. The son of the plane is not just for fun. Chen Shi estimated that if he really wanted to kill the main character group to gain villain value, he would die from various homicide accidents before the plan was implemented, and even suicide was not impossible. Easily blending into the Shinkansen, Chen Shi sat in the carriage behind Conan. Nagoya is here, Nagoya is here. When the train broadcast sounded, he quickly stood up and left the station, staring at the 2 pirated versions that had just walked down. He quickly stepped forward and leaned in, sliding out a pre-prepared spray bottle from his sleeve. He sprayed a few times on both faces and grabbed the money box. Due to the obstruction of the back and black coat, the passers-by did not notice anything wrong. "You guy. Who are you?" 2 pirated goods opened their mouths at the same time and then collapsed at the same time. Chen Shi continued to move forward and got stuck in the last moment of the train closing, entering the previous carriage of Conan. The entire operation lasted for no more than 30 seconds, and he didn't even pause in front of the two of them. Thanks to karate training and the system's physical fitness bonus, his physical fitness has greatly increased in all aspects, and this operation can be achieved without the need for advance rehearsals. The train started, and the money in the suitcase changed its name and surname from then on. Go to the restroom, carefully remove gloves, masks, sunglasses, spray cans, and the plastic wrap used to block the sleeves and throw them into the trash can. After washing your hands carefully a few times, take out new equipment and replace it. That spray bottle is filled with liquid ether, an anesthetic. Although it evaporates rapidly, as long as the distance is close enough, it can also cause a person to quickly faint. This is also the only option to both receive money and continue to stay in the car to unlock subsequent tasks. Now he can understand Xiaodong's outrageous technique in the roller coaster case back then. With his level of karate, he can achieve this level, let alone a professional gymnast. The world of science, really not talking about science. At this moment, a few children were chattering and running around outside the restroom, and Chen Shi knew it was time. Hiding at the corner of the stairs on the train floor, he reached out and grabbed Conan at the moment when the 4 children were kicked out. He lightly tapped his neck and turned around to leave, looking for an empty private room to enter. Tie his limbs with a rolling band, and Chen Shi returned to the second-floor non-smoking carriage. He also knocked on the back of the neck to make the buyer faint, and silently took the bomb handbag away. Return to the private room, open the handbag, dismantle the bomb, and close the handbag. The current era background is probably in the 1990s, and with the 2020 knowledge in Chen Shi's mind, it is more than enough to cope. You should know that although Chen Shi did not achieve top grades, he was proficient in the derivative use of various knowledge. As for the reason, for a period of time, he enjoyed reading novels such as King of War, Special Forces, and Mercenaries. Physical and chemical teachers have also commented that if he doesn't follow the right path, at least he will be stuck in prison. Unfortunately, both the righteous and the evil have not yet begun when they encountered that kind of white-eyed wolf incident. Shaking his head to erase the memories of the past, Chen Shi opened the private room and poured mineral water on Conan's face to make him sober. Before Conan could recover, he coldly said, "Shinichi Kudo, I didn't expect you to not die." Has the famous high school detective turned into a little ghost? It seems that APS 4869 is not completely useless either. What are you guys up to? Conan breathed quickly, fear spreading endlessly in his heart. He didn't expect there to be people from the black organization on this train. I want to use the items on my body, but my limbs cannot move at all. The shadow of death has engulfed him. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Entry Promotion, Searching for a New Residence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Entry Promotion, Searching for a New Residence, do you know this? Holding his handbag and shaking it in front of Conan's eyes, Chen Shi continued to smirk, pretending to be our organization to trade with others and then silencing them is really a clumsy imitation. However, blasting the Shinkansen with a bomb is also a wonderful idea. Ha ha ha. Ah. Let go of the others, they are all innocent. Conan roared with bloodshot eyes, his limbs struggling and leaving bloodstains. Putting the handbag 1 meter away from Conan, Chen Shi continued, that girl's name is Murilan, isn't it? And those little ghosts, do you guys seem to have a good relationship? As he spoke, he closed his hands and opened them again, exaggerating his voiceover. Boom. All turned into ashes. Ha ha ha. After speaking, Chen Shi ignored Conan's shout and left the private room without any hesitation. He constantly changed his clothes in the blind corner of the train monitoring, and finally returned to his seat as if nothing had happened, lying on the table pretending to sleep. Not long after, there was a commotion on the train, and Conan, who was mentally lethargic and had wounds on his limbs due to struggling too hard, was rescued by passers-by who saw him shouting. Chen Shi's villain value also stopped at 16.9% at this moment. Task 2 activated. Facilitate/prevent explosion event, completed. Task 3 activated. Make your name appear and spread. On the other side, Xiaolan tightly hugged Conan and comforted him. It's okay, Conan. Dad has already called the police. We can catch that killer when the train arrives. Thinking of how Dr. Aguri trusted her and handed Conan over to her, but her negligence led to such torture, Xiaolan couldn't accept it. She must find the culprit. Conan's mind was a bit dazed, thinking about whether to confess his identity to Xiaolan and why the mysterious person did not detonate the bomb. Suddenly, I felt like there was something on the collar. When I reached out, there was a piece of paper that read. There is only one truth, this is a prank. Have you been scared? But that organization is indeed investigating your information. They need to confirm whether the target died after taking the medicine. I have already dealt with that bomb, see you next time. This guy. The note was tightly clenched in his palm, and Conan's teeth clenched, causing a faint pain in the wound that had already been bandaged. The train arrived in Kyoto, and after the police arrived, the bomb was disposed of. With Conan's reminder, the buyer was captured, but the mysterious person only found some clothes in the blind spots of the train monitoring. There are no fingerprints, no hair, and even no dandruff in the clothes. Because of that note, Conan did not provide any self-disclosure information to the police. The mysterious person was ultimately classified as a pervert who likes to detain children. After a simple investigation, the train passenger information was registered and released. After all, the source of the bomb is already clear, and it is clearly not feasible to detain all passengers of the train under the pretext of detaining minors. Moreover, the mysterious person has solved the bomb crisis, and the Kyoto police do not want to spend too much resources and energy. Looking for a hotel in Kyoto and seeing the box filled with money, Chen Shi finally relaxed. The film in the shadow state not only resists damage, but also blocks fingerprints, hair, and dandruff from falling off. As long as it is not captured by surveillance cameras, it is almost impossible for him to be detected. Gloves are used to cover the shape of the hands, cotton is used to enlarge the face shape on the side of the mask, and height pads are placed inside the shoes. It can be said that as long as Conan does not self-destruct and mobilize a large amount of police resources for investigation, his plan is perfect. The function of that note is exactly the same. With Conan's high intelligence and arrogance, he knew that a mysterious person knew his identity and information within the organization, but instead of placing an assassin, he came to remind him. Although his approach was somewhat malicious, it was inevitable that he would think about the undercover situation and naturally help Chen Shi cover up. There was no rush to go back. After calling the school to ask for leave, Chen Shi pretended to be a tourist and visited various local karate shops to supplement his understanding of karate. Under the catalysis of unforgettable and epiphany, he quickly learned these new knowledge and broke through the current bottleneck. But that's not enough. Use entry to promote points. Successfully used, with the system prompt, the text on the entry began to blur, and finally a new entry was obtained. Karate Master, you have become a karate master, but there is still a considerable distance from the master. You will gain an increase in strength and your physical fitness points will increase by 10 while practicing karate. In addition to the rewards from the first two tasks, Chen Shi's physical fitness increased by an additional 12 points, roughly doubling his physical fitness. This is not the kind of destructive technique, but directly aimed at improving the body, including reflexes, muscle strength, bone density, vision, recovery, and so on. The most obvious thing is that he has become much more handsome. If we compare the person before the entry change with the person now, then the person now can compare him to 100 before the entry change. It's time to go back too. Chen Shi packed his luggage and returned to Tokyo. Thanks to the chaos of time, people in this world are very insensitive to time. Chen Shi stayed in Kyoto for 2 full months and the school teachers did not call to urge him, as if he had taken a leave yesterday. Returning to the rental room, I stayed in the hotel for an extended period of time and suddenly came back. I felt that the room was so small. Although the hotel is not very big either. It seems like we have found a place to live. It would be better if the area is large enough and the price is cheap enough. The 100 million yuan obtained from the Shinkansen is all cash and the coding is chaotic. As long as there is no sudden consumption of large figures, it will not cause suspicion. While still thinking about whether to ask the real estate agent, Chen Shi saw through the window the flickering flames in a pointed villa from afar. By the way, that house is big enough and definitely cheap. In Shishome, not far from Daidan Elementary School, there is a huge villa covering an area. It is rumored that since the male owner was killed 5 years ago and his family moved away, lamentations can often be heard inside. It is a haunted house that is very terrifying in the eyes of elementary school students. But in fact, behind the sigh is just a tragedy. The real culprit of the murder in the incident 5 years ago was the son of the male protagonist, caused by excessive oppression from the original family, leading to emotional instability. Later, the mother imprisoned her son in the basement of the villa in order to prevent him from going to jail, which has lasted for 5 years. In fact, the police did not find out who the culprit was in this matter, they just confirmed that it was not a suicide. They don't have to hide, and now they can buy plane tickets to leave Japan without anyone paying attention. Chen Shi decided to help the mother and son and observe their future place of residence. Do whatever you say, come to the haunted house, climb over the wall in a few seconds, and rely on your physical strength to grow hard in the dimly lit room as if walking flat. After that, I have to throw away these statues and leave them in the living room, they look so ugly. This room is large enough, and it faces north and south, making it suitable for an office. This room is nice, it's used as the master bedroom. This place is much larger than I imagined. It seems that in the future, we should consider picking up some people to live with and make it more lively. Muttering and constantly groping in the villa, suddenly came the sound of children chirping in front of him. Recalling the plot, Chen Shi was speechless and said, "It wouldn't be so coincidental, would it?" End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Birds Soaring in the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Birds Soaring in the Sky. In the plot, it was indeed these little ghosts who came to decipher, but due to time chaos, it was impossible to know which day it was. Unexpectedly, as soon as he returned to solve the housing problem, he encountered them. Now it's a bit troublesome. Shinichi Kudo is an absolutely righteous person, and he won't let criminals escape trial, even if they have already borne the punishment they deserve. This will not change just because it becomes smaller. However, if Akio, the man imprisoned in the dungeon, surrenders, his mother will walk from the shadows to the sunshine, and the value of this building will also rise. This is Tokyo. If it weren't for other factors, he wouldn't be able to afford such a large villa for that 100 million yuan. We need to solve Conan first. Chen Shi lurked in the darkness, slowly approaching. Bu Mei and Yuan Tai hid in a room, constantly eating snacks to offset some of their fear, while waiting for Conan to come back. No more eating. Bu Mei held the remaining few packets of snacks in her arms. Conan hasn't come back yet, and Guanyan must have been hungry for so long. Yuan Tai regretfully said, "Okay, I get it." A fragrance slowly drifted into his nose at this moment, and the little chubby man immediately ran out of the room with an empty mind, shouting to go find food. Bu Mei was about to call a stop when she suddenly felt like something was standing behind her, and a chill rushed from her feet down her spine towards her brain. Gently put Xiaolan back into the room. Chen Shi didn't go after Yuan Tai, so it's better for this chubby little guy to suffer a bit, and it can also attract Conan. After the screams came, he slowly walked forward and met Conan in the hallway. Undoubtedly, it was Conan. After a brief moment of panic, he quickly raised his left hand, aimed at it with his watch, and shot out an anesthetic needle. The anesthesia needle flashed a cold light, but Chen Shi easily dodged it. The pupils contracted, and although Conan was surprised by the dodging ability of the shadow in front of him, he didn't hesitate. He squatted down and twisted the shoe knob, unleashing terrifying power, then turned around and ran. There's no football around here for him to play. What he didn't know was that in the moment he turned around, Chen Shi approached like a ghost, and before he could run 2 more steps, Conan lost consciousness and fainted. Carrying Conan, Chen Shi arrived at the entrance of the basement and walked into it without covering up. I knew it wouldn't be just those 2 little ghosts. Who are you? Zhao Fu's mother held a sharp knife in both hands, pretending to rush forward to kill at any time. But the slight trembling of her legs betrayed her. Perhaps this is because a woman is weak, but a mother is strong. Chen Shi quickly approached and grabbed the handle of the knife with one hand, easily removing it. Don't hurt my mother. Zhao Fu, who had just gone crazy, was now tightly pressed against the iron fence, his eyes filled with anxiety and worry. Don't worry. Chen Shi threw the knife back into the bucket. I'm not here to trouble you. 5 years ago, a young man lost control of his emotions and killed his father. He then repented here to this day. Chen raised his eyebrows and said, I will offer you redemption. Zhao Fu's mother's legs softened and she sat slumped on the ground, tears streaming uncontrollably. Are you a police officer? I didn't expect to be found after hiding for 5 years. No. Don't catch Zhao Fu, I killed the person, just catch me. Zhao Fu's mother crawled over and hugged Chen Shi's thigh, crying. Chen Shi picked up the woman, swayed his fingers horizontally, and said with a wicked smile, My name is Chen Shi, I'm a bad guy. Bad guy. The mother and son were both stunned at this moment, unsure of what to say. Seeing the hot iron, Chen Shi pointed at Zhao Fu and said, Actually, the police haven't found the culprit. Even if he goes to the police station and tries to stroll around, there won't be anything wrong. On the contrary, staying in this dark underground for 5 years, repenting day and night, is it not a kind of prison? The maximum sentence for manslaughter is 7 years. Did he really think of killing his own father when he first started? He just wants to vent. Release the pressure of decades without seeing light, release the life controlled by others. Chen Shi approached Zhao Fu and his 4 eyes met at this moment. Do you want to face fear and go back to the past? At this moment, the lifeless eyes shone brightly, and Zhao Fu murmured, I want to. The gray shadow spread around the corner of his eyes, gradually converging into a vortex on Chen Shi's forehead. Zhao Fu was momentarily dazed, and his surroundings returned to the moment when his father fell 5 years ago. It's okay, Zhao Fu. Mom won't let you go to jail. Zhao Fu's mother stood in front of the body, suppressing her fear and covering Zhao Fu's cheek. As he spoke, he pulled Zhao Fu towards the basement and said, You go hide in the basement first. When the police arrive, I'll say someone has entered the room to rob. A strong force pulled her back, and Zhao Fu looked at his father's body and hugged his mother tightly. It's okay, Mom. Take care of your body, and when I come out, we'll go to England together, to the River Thames you've always wanted to go to. We'll settle there. Just like a prisoner bird finally breaking its shackles, Akio's heart is finally free at this moment. 7 years later, Zhao Fu and his mother, who were released from prison, came to the Mihua cemetery and placed flowers in front of his father's monument, telling about everything in prison in the past. Father, I'm taking my mother to England, which is the place you've always said you're taking us to. The bird flew into the sky, the world shattered and disappeared, and Akio's pupils refocused. Chen Shi felt a splitting headache and rubbed his brow, retreating to the side, leaving room for the mother and son to talk. The skill associated with embracing shadows, a shadow mask, has an extremely terrifying effect. It can pull the target's soul into a shadow vortex, creating the most terrifying illusion in their heart, causing them to constantly sink and eventually be devoured by the vortex, feeding back the shadow mask. As the owner of the mask, Chen Shi can easily retrieve Zhao Fu from the vortex at any time, but intervening in the environment requires a lot of spiritual energy. In fact, in The Illusion, after Zhao Fu said that sentence, he immediately turned to the scene of the final cemetery. During the 7 years in prison, it was actually an implanted idea. In The Illusion, the target will firmly believe this idea and automatically complete and fabricate related memories. After leaving the vortex, the memories in the entire illusion will quickly dissipate, only remembering some extremely profound fragments. Just like when memories related to dreams are remembered at the time after waking up, they will be completely forgotten after a while. These are the results of Chen Shi's test during his training in Kyoto to catch a thief and a follower, but being able to pull Zhao Fu into the shadow vortex was purely due to Zhao Fu's own agreement. Otherwise, if you want to force an adult to enter, you need to stare at each other for at least 3 hours. Perhaps there will be some optimization after devouring the soul and feeding back, but Chen Shi has not yet found a suitable target. Although Zhao Fu's 7 years in prison in The Illusion were fabricated, in reality, the 5-year dungeon was a fact. He had already endured the punishment he deserved, and what he lacked was only a sense of moral identity. Father was like a cage, locking him and his mother inside. He wanted to make a hole in the cage, but he didn't expect the cage to collapse when he exerted too much force. Prisoner birds either die in cages or soar in the sky. Fortunately, Chen Shi doesn't have to worry about these things. After all, he is an orphan, a wild bird in the forest. Although he has his own worries, he is incredibly free. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Xiaolan, I. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 9. Detective Knowledge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Detective Knowledge. Farewell to Muri Lan. Chen Shi arrived at the Mihua Town Library. Since we are planning to open a detective agency, we need to supplement relevant knowledge, otherwise we will be caught blind when encountering cases beyond the plot. Anyway, today is the weekend, tomorrow may also be the weekend, and even the day after tomorrow may be the weekend. Don't worry about going to school. What is the knowledge related to detectives? Chen Shi believes that psychology, behaviorism, and microexpression are the mainstream, and require knowledge such as tracking and reconnaissance, unlocking and decryption, hypnosis, and forensic science to assist. Whether it's Conan or Heiji Hattori, they have some exposure to this knowledge, but compared to using it, they are more willing to use their height, intelligence, and imagination to combine the clues they find and directly restore the crime techniques. Chen Shi doesn't have such great imagination, but he can constantly compare the details and knowledge in the memory picture with his unforgettable memory, and achieve the same or even surpassing speed. Mori Kogoro used a similar method, but he couldn't call up knowledge at any time, let alone jot down all the details. However, confused detectives can still be considered reliable in some cases about themselves, and their little heads can be barely used after overclocking. This weekend far exceeded expectations, and Chen Shi spent 5 days soaking in the library before jumping to Wednesday on the calendar. After school, he brought Muri Ran and Suzuki Yukiko to the haunted house on the 16th of the 4th eye. After I solved the case, the owner here invested in me personally, including renting this place to me at a super low price to establish a detective agency and a start-up fund. Chen Shi and the two of them familiarized themselves with the terrain and finally stopped in the selected room. I plan to have the construction team separate this area and downstairs to create a reception location for the office, he said. After everything is done, Xiaolan, all you need to do is come here 3 hours a day after school to organize the case documents. I will hire someone else to do other things such as hygiene and gardening. As for the remuneration, how about calculating it based on 10,000 yen per day and weekends off? Muri Lan was shocked, covering her mouth and shaking her head. You don't need to pay me anymore, it's only 3 hours a day. She was just thinking of helping Chen Shi get through the early stages, but she didn't expect Chen Shi to offer such a high salary. You should know that even if it's her father, a detective named Kogoro Mori, 70% of the cases are priced at tens of thousands of yen. Oh my. Suzuki Yukiko smiled and hugged Muri-ran. Didn't you hear Chen say there are investors? And Xiaolan, you're definitely worth this amount. Living in various high-end circles since childhood, she knew that those senior investors had no interest in how to use investment funds, as long as they could ultimately receive returns. Even for certain industries, what is sought is not financial returns. The detective is among them, and investors are more concerned about the huge network behind a famous detective. Speaking of which, why does Chen Shi seem to be so handsome after going out for a few days and coming back? That's right, with Xiaolan's skills, I think she can handle this matter very well, Chen Shi agreed. Just like Kogoro, almost everything in the office except for solving cases is handled by Muri-ran. Although 10,000 yen per day may seem high, it is common in many high-end offices. Picking up the price list that had been drafted a few days ago from the table and handing it to Xiaolan, Chen Shi continued, just take a look at my price list and you won't be worried about this. Xiaolan took the price list and his mouth grew bigger as he looked at it. This. Searching for pets for 10,000 to 100,000 yen, investigating targets with a minimum of 500,000 yen without a cap, and protecting targets with a minimum of 500,000 yen without a cap. The exaggerated price above is unheard of. It can be said that if there are really cases, a week's earnings can be equivalent to a month or even a few months for the Maori detective agency. Will anyone really accept this price? Xiaolan puzzled. To solve her doubts, Chen Shi turned to Suzuki Unz and asked, Unz, how much does your Suzuki Foundation spend on public relations investigations every year? Suzuki Yukiko pressed her hand against her chin and thought, well, I'm not too sure about the specifics, but it shouldn't be less than 5 billion yen, right? That's right. Chen Shi nodded. Groups like Suzuki Corporation, which have industries all over Japan, spend a lot of money on public relations investigations every year. They are also my main target customers. For them, speed and results are much more important than cost. Suzuki Yukiko frowned and asked, the fees for the group are indeed very high, but they often involve dozens or hundreds of people operating simultaneously. How can you have the confidence to do it alone? There is a high-end market, but not everyone can make this money. As a friend, if Chen Shi only thinks in her mind and doesn't have this ability, she thinks it's better to switch early. You should have gone to a cocktail party last night and didn't rest until late, so you didn't have time to deal with styling in the morning and evening. So, during your lunch break, you went to the Margarita Hotel to take a shower and dress up again. Suzuki Yukiko's eyes widened in surprise and she said, how do you know? You usually wear a headband 5 centimeters above your forehead, with 2 hair clips at the back to raise your hair. The inner end of the eyebrows is trimmed to 2 millimeters, the outer side is slightly raised, and the facial pores are closed with some kind of facial mask. And not only did you not match this morning, but there were also slight creases on the shoulder blades of your school uniform, indicating that you woke up late and rushed to school in a hurry. Alcohol takes 24.48 hours to fully metabolize in the body, so you may have a headache when you come to school and occasionally rub your head. After lunch break, when you returned to school, you had a scent of Margarita Hotel lobby aromatherapy on your body, while restoring your previous makeup this time. Even Muri-ran looked like she was seeing a ghost. You should know that even Shinichi Kudo wouldn't notice so many details. Suzuki Yukiko was stunned for a few seconds before turning her eyes and shaking her head to deny, you're wrong. When I was saying these things, your pupils contracted, and then you looked at me, representing surprise. Your hand unconsciously touched the headband, and your nose twitched to smell the smell. When you deny it, you shake your head frequently and dare not look directly at me, indicating that you are not confident, then tell Xiaolan what she did. Chen Shi looked at Xiaolan and said, there is a drop of oil on Xiaolan's clothes. Based on the color, it should have splashed on this morning. During lunch break, he refused the invitation from the garden to leave the campus and slept directly on the table. On the way here, he mentioned that he would go to the supermarket to buy dinner ingredients later. The above clues can lead to the conclusion that Xiaolan got up very early and prepared breakfast for Conan and Uncle Maori, which is why she was tired and drowsy, and remembered clearly that there were no ingredients in the refrigerator. Muri-lan lowered her head and indeed noticed a very small, light oil stain on her clothes. Detective Suzuki Yukiko couldn't manage her expression anymore, puzzled. How did you notice all of this? Pointing to his eyes, Chen Shi smiled slightly and said, I never forget it. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Is not right, it is indeed not right. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 is not right, it is indeed not right. Suzuki Yukiko and Muri-ran looked at each other and nodded in affirmation at the same time. Obviously, neither of them believed this truth, only thinking that Chen Shi was exaggerating his own abilities and giving encouragement was enough. After all, compared to having top-notch reasoning skills, being unforgettable at a glance is simply outrageous. Chen Shi was too lazy to show them the authenticity and continued to lead the way towards the villa. Pointing to the back half of the villa, Chen Shi said, I plan to connect all the areas behind it and transform them into a training ground for exercise when there are no cases. Training ground. Can I use it after finishing work? Xiaolan's eyes lit up. Each karate gym has quite strict rules that all disciples must abide by, including limited usage time per person. After all, this is Tokyo, and the cost of opening a store is huge. If those karate shops want to make a profit, they have to hire more people, and over time, their training resources become very scarce. Although she would not refuse to use karate if she wanted to, her kind heart did not allow her to compete with those younger generations. Many times, training is conducted in karate clubs with limited equipment and limited activity areas. If Chen Shi can use the training room after building it, not to mention the salary, it's okay to pay back. No problem at all, then I can also experience the strength of Tokyo Karate Queen. There are 3 aspects to consider when calling Muri-lan over. First, her excellent work ability, second, her ability to pull Conan's wool, and third, her karate practice. Practical combat is always more important than theory, he lacks practical experience. Muri-ran blushed and scratched her head, there's no karate queen left. Since you're here, let's have dinner before we leave. I'll make more and you'll take Conan and Uncle Maori back later. Chen Shi then showed off his cooking skills in front of the two of them. The ingredients are constantly flipping in their hands, cut into various shapes, and hot oil and flames create a romantic atmosphere unique to Chinese kitchens. A table full of various dishes constantly emitting fragrance, even Suzuki Yukiko, who was born into a wealthy family and never lacked delicious food, couldn't help but drool. Okay. Putting down the last finishing dessert, Chen Shi untied his apron and gave the order to attack. Conan and Uncle Muri's portion has already been packed, let's have dinner. Cold dishes, meat dishes, vegetarian dishes, soup, and desserts each serve 3 dishes, including steaming, frying, stir-frying, boiling, and stewing. In addition, with superior physical control, these dishes have excellent control in terms of heat, seasoning, and timing. At first, the 2 women, who were somewhat reserved, ate faster and faster, until they couldn't eat at all and collapsed on the chair, with happiness and satisfaction on their faces. There is no waste of the remaining dishes, Chen Shi spins them all into his mouth, leaving behind piles of empty plates. Separation. Suzuki Yukiko hiccuped and said leisurely, Chen, you cook much better than my chef. Separation. With the same hiccup, Xiaolan stood up and wanted to go wash the dishes, but was stopped by Chen Shi. Pointing to the increasingly dim sky outside, Chen Shi smiled and said, if you don't go back, Conan and Uncle Muri will have to wait and worry. With more than 10 packing boxes full, the 2 sisters walked slowly in the darkness. Xiaolan, I still have to come to Chen's place for dinner tomorrow. Suzuki Yuenzi shouted behind her head. Without even thinking, Xiaolan shook her head and denied, "No way, Yuanzi. How could you trouble Chen every day?" "Humph." Suzuki Yukiko snorted coldly, raised her little fist and shook it in front of Muri Ran. "I think you're afraid that staying with a perfect man like Chen for too long will forget about your reasoning maniac, right?" Qi and blood instantly rose, and the white and tender skin on her cheeks turned red. Muri Lan punched Suzuki Yukiko and said, "No, Yukiko, what are you talking about?" "Ha ha ha." Suzuki Yukiko grinned wickedly, "Anyway, I have to come over tomorrow, and I can't do without Chen." The two of them playfully walked to the fork in the road, bid farewell, and then went back to their respective homes. Walking on the dark street, Muri Lan's heart was empty, and Shinichi Kudo's face kept appearing in his mind, with tears swirling in his eyes. "Speaking of which, when will you come back, Shinichi?" On the other hand, Yukiko Suzuki also had some worries, but in a different direction. Chen is great, handsome, good at studying, has strong reasoning skills, and can even cook, Suzuki Yuanzi thought to herself, holding her hands and twisting her body. "We're going to fall." In a dark corner not far away, two bodyguards rolled their eyes at the same time. "How many times did this make Miss fall?" "I'm not sure, but this seems different." "What difference can there be? Miss has always been this hot for 3 minutes. The next day, due to the construction team's work, Suzuki Yuanzi did not fulfill his wish and took Chen Shi and Muri Lan to a luxury hotel for French cuisine. Conan and Muri Kogoro had another day of packed meals. On the next day, Muri Ran felt embarrassed and also paid for the two to go out to the restaurant. Conan and Muri Kogoro looked at the food packed on the table, then at Muri Ran who was doing homework in the room, and a strange atmosphere began to permeate. "Something's wrong, it's really not right." The delicious food in his mouth seemed to be chewing on paper, and Muri Kogoro had never felt the food so unpleasant before. Conan also had a similar taste, his eyes turning green. "Sister Xiaolan has never let us have a packaged meal." Pop ×2 After a brief silence, cola and beer smashed onto the table at the same time. The two, who had never agreed before, now spoke up at the same time, "There's a problem." The two leaned together after staring at each other, whispering to each other and occasionally nodding in agreement with each other's opinions. After finishing her homework, Xiaolan came out to tidy up the mess. When she saw the group of old and young people who were about to stick together, she was surprised and said, "When did your relationship get so good?" Quickly crawling away, Conan raised his cola and said, "No, it's just uncle teaching me some knowledge about reasoning." Xiaolan also raised his beer and clinked a glass with Conan void before replying, "That's right, that's right. This little ghost's talent is indeed amazing." As both sides drank, there seemed to be some unknown plan starting from this moment. Late at night, a big-headed little ghost sneaked into Xiaolan's room and came to the desk. He gently opened his shoulder bag and reached in to constantly explore. When he touched something cold and hard, the corner of his mouth unconsciously curled up, ready to take it out. Suddenly, he felt as if he was being stared at by a wild beast, his whole body stiff and trembling, and he dared not speak out. "Conan, little friend. Are you doing it?" The beast behind him asked a question that reached his soul. "Xiao, Sister Xiaolan." Conan stuttered and turned around, his eyes instantly clear. "I'm afraid of sleeping on my own, I want to sleep with Sister Xiaolan." "Oh, this is it. Muri Lan hugged her fist and nodded confidently. Conan broke out in a cold sweat and said, "No, that's right. It's just this wood." Bang! Xiuqi punched down, and then Conan's big bag on top of his head was thrown out of the room by Muri Ran. "Get out of bed." End of this chapter.